Welcome to the next installment of the SobekCM training videos. Thank you very much for joining me. Today we're going to look at submitting a book through the online interface. So most of our training sessions up to this point have talked about the administrative features of the system at the aggregation level. So this will be the first time we really look at submitting materials or actual digital resources through the online interface. So we're going to look at first some main concepts involved with the items and basic things you need to know about working with items in this system. I'll then talk just very briefly about how digital resources are held and sort of some basic concepts about digital resources within SobekCM. And then we'll just do a quick live demo. So one of the first things we need to talk about with main concepts is behaviors versus metadata. So the system has a separation when you're going in to edit metadata or whether you're editing behaviors, for example. So behaviors are how this digital resource behaves within this SobekCM library. Metadata is really the information about the digital resource in general. So if you were to take your resource and port it into SobekCM, you would bring in that metadata. If you were to take the digital resource out of SobekCM and port it elsewhere, that would be what you would be exporting, would be the metadata and the images. So the difference really is that metadata would follow that item. Metadata really is about the digital resource, whereas behaviors are more SobekCM specific. How does this item behave in the SobekCM library? So page images versus downloads. We basically can build two different structure maps within our digital resource. One is all of the page images. So these are things generally derived from TIFF images where you digitized an item, but they could be born digital material that you then create the page images for. And then there's downloads. Downloads are pretty much everything else. Any other kind of material or files that you'd like to attach to your digital resource. You can certainly attach any kind, and those would be your generally downloads. So you may have special viewers for the two of these things. The viewers are just how they display within the item. So clearly page images would have something where you could turn the pages, where you may be able to zoom in on the page. Those would be types of viewers. You also have specialized viewers for different types of downloads, like a PDF or Flash, certain other kind of viewers. So viewers are sort of how you see the digital resource. So the viewers are really tied to the digital resource and tied to the type of files you've attached to it. We don't really have an idea of content types within SobekCM. Any type of material can have access to any part of the system and any viewer. You don't have to predefine what your resource types are going to be. So those viewers are, again, you set them at the item level, and they're also engaged with the file somewhat. So two other concepts that are important, particularly for doing online submission, is the concepts of templates and the default metadata sets. So the templates define which fields are made available for editing through the online template. They'll also define your agreement text, what kind of uploads you can do, whether the item is public or private after it's submitted, whether you receive an email every time someone submits an item into your library. So a lot of different things, but the template really defines the overall experience of a user as they're submitting through your online interface. A default metadata set just gives you some default metadata that's loaded whenever they start a new item. So you may have some default note text that you want to involve, or maybe some default institutional data that you want to put in there. So as you can imagine, you can have multiple ones of these. You can have multiple templates, multiple default metadata sets, and you can associate each one with different users. So just what is a digital resource within SobekCM? One of the primary concepts within a digital resource for many people is a DOI, or Digital Object Identifier. Within SobekCM, that's divided up really into two different pieces. One is the BibID, which is the bibliographic identifier. That's 10 digits. It starts with 2 to 5 characters. It ends in numbers. There's some examples for you. You can define in your template, actually, what the beginning of your BibID should be. So each template can have a different beginning. And that's really associated with your title. And then you have the volume identifier, which is just a 5-digit long number starting at 1. And that's unique within each BibID. So essentially, if you are digitizing something like the Miami Herald, the Miami Herald metadata would be associated with the BibID, and then each individual issue would be a volume. So each volume that you have, each digital resource of that series would share the same BibID but have different volumes. So those also become involved in your Perl. Your base Perl is your base URL plus the bib and the vid. You can override this within the system, of course, but this is by default what we think of as our PURL within the system. So it's very clean. One of the nice things about our system is our URLs generally are very clean. So I'll show you this, but every time you look at a digital resource, you're really directed directly to this PURL. So if a user wants to, say, capture their URL, there is no extraneous or very little extraneous data after that URL. So digital resources, we talked about their main identifiers. Digital resources are wrapped in a METS package. SobekCM is extremely standards-based, so everything ultimately is a METS wrapper. You can swap out the main field, so we have mods listed here. 99% of the time it is mods. You can also use Dublin Core in there, or you could actually use Mark XML. But the bulk of the systems that use SobekCM are using a METS wrapper with the mods containing as much data as we can get into the mods. So mods doesn't necessarily contain every field that we need, so we have these extension schemas. So in this picture, we're showing VRA Core and Darwin Core as another part of this digital resource. So these would just be extension schemas and have only the metadata fields that are not present in the mods. So Darwin Core, for example, has kingdom, phylum, species, genus, all of these things which you don't find anywhere in the mods. So that allows us, by using this extension schema, to bring in a bunch of different types of metadata. And finally, there is a little bit of additional custom metadata that we store. SobekCM has a little bit of behavior data you can put in the METS and some other information in there. But the majority of our data is held in a METS wrapper with mods inside of it. If you're not familiar with these, both of these are Library of Congress standards, and you can look on their website and find it. So this is really the core of our SobekCM resource object, is the peach or pink area right in the middle. So this contains all the type of metadata that you would have in a mods package, METS package, Mark or Dublin Core. All of that data is held in there. And what we see around it are these satellite extension schemas. So these are schemas where we've added additional information. So it's very simple to create these extension schemas. So here is a pull-up. We'll zoom in and look at one particular example. We worked with one particular institution that was interested in doing more information about learning object models. So we looked at the IEEE LOM standard, and we said, what fields exist within this standard that we don't already have in mods, for example? And we came up with these particular fields that we wanted to add. So this became an extension schema. So within any object in the SobekCM digital repository, you have access to the standard metadata extension of learning object metadata, for example. So each one of the things that are circling the central part are just different schemas like this. So finally, about a digital resource, these are ultimately, as any digital resource, files sitting within a file structure. So you can see this file structure up here. This is actually the bib ID and the vid. So we take that digital identifier, and that's how we store the item within your repository. So this uses a basic pair tree structure, sort of like California Digital Library does. So you can see just how we break it down by bib and store it. So if you look in the actual directory, you'll see all of your files. You'll see your JPEG. In this case, we have a thumbnail JPEG. We have a JPEG 2000 for zooming. We have your METS file. So this is the user-submitted METS file that has all the data about your digital resource. We have a mark.xml file. The system maintains the mark.xml file for easy import and export of the records into other systems. And finally, the agreement.txt file is here also. So this was submitted online, and when they submitted it, they agreed to certain text, and that is stored here. So when it comes time to open this digital resource online, it pulls a very minimal amount of data from the database, generally the behaviors, and then it'll open this METS file, and that's sort of the canonical storage of metadata. Everything comes from this METS file right there. Okay, so we're going to quickly do a live demo. We're not going to go into great depth into each of these portions, but I just wanted to quickly give you a tour of submitting an item online, performing some work on it, and then finally viewing it online and seeing the final result. So we're already logged on to our site. We'll click on My Demo, and we'll say, you can either click it from here, your My Demo home, you can say Start a New Item, or you'll just see it here. So if you have any user that you've given the rights to submit new items, you'll see it right here. We'll click Start a New Item. We're going to agree to this old grant of permissions right here. I have access to multiple templates, so they're in this drop-down. We'll just use this modified Digital Library of the Caribbean version. We'll hit Accept. And you can see this basic fields that it's asking us for. So again, this is all controlled by your template. With your template, you can define which elements are appearing here to get from the user. Let's just hit next. So I want to show you the 3 fields that are really necessary for SobekCM resource. You need a title, a material type, and an institution code. You can define some of these in your default metadata, of course. For example, material type and institution code, you may decide to always have a standard, or for a particular project have a standard. But this is the bare minimum the system requires. So I'll enter the title. We'll do the resource type of a book. For the physical description, this is one of the few places where it really is helpful to encode it, similar to MARC. So as you're entering this information, you may have some questions about that metadata field. So that's what all these questions are here. So if you click one of these, it'll pull up help for that item. So we click it, and you can see it takes us to the sobekrepository.org community site, and here is some help information about this particular element. Gives you best practices, and in particular discusses maybe the way you could enter it so that it ports to MARC the best. So this is one of the only fields where you have a little bit of tricky maybe encoding that you want to do. You may have a little variety, of course. You may now be saying pages and illustrated instead. So let's go ahead and continue entering our metadata. We have a few identifiers actually for this item, so we'll go ahead and enter the OCLC number. And if you want to enter a multiple, now we have another identifier. We'll hit the plus sign, and we'll enter the LCCN. You, of course, may not have these or want to put these in your system, but you can put in local identifiers here as well. So you may have a local identifier for this item. So we'll say, when you say local, we'll define our holding location and our source institution. And let's enter the creator's name. And we don't have a publisher name. We have a place of publication, though, and a publication date. So finally, let's enter a few subject keywords. We'll just keep these to a bare minimum. And you could, of course, have other fields here. You could have genre here. You could have anything else you want to add. These are just the fields that our template at the moment is asking for. So we'll hit next. And now it gives us an optional ability to upload our files. So let's hit select files, and we'll navigate, and we'll upload all of our digitized TIFFs. So let's select them, hit open, and you can see them all simultaneously uploading. We'll let all of these upload, and then we'll come back and we'll finish submitting our package. So the final 2 images are uploading here. So that just took us about 45 seconds or so to upload them all. As it uploads these TIFFs, it will also generate some derivatives. So we'll notice once it pulls in here that it has already created some derivatives. So a JPEG image for viewing and a thumbnail image have been created from each individual TIFF. We have a label here. If we don't use the label, it'll just use the name of the file as our label. So we'll leave it blank at the moment. We'll come down here and let's hit submit. Okay, so our item has been submitted now. Immediately comes up here. This template, we have it set to load the item as private. So that's why you're seeing it say private item here. You can change that. Your template could be public by default. So if we look at our resource, we can look at our description, and we'll see all the metadata that we entered. All of our data is right here. So one of the things about our system in the basic architecture is there's a builder. So this builder is running in the background all the time. So we uploaded our TIFFs. We didn't yet have the zoomable images there, and maybe a few other changes, a few other viewers. So the builder is watching in the background. About every minute or so, it will wake up and it will figure out this item has just been submitted, and it will create any other additional derivatives. So this is true for the zoomable images, and it's also true for PDFs. So if you upload a PDF, within a minute or so, you'll see the thumbnail for the PDF appear, and all the full text will be extracted from that PDF, and then it will become full text searchable. Indeed, so the builder did run in the background, and now we're seeing this. We have our page images. If you click on it now, if you go to page turner, for example, you'll see we have a page turner action. We also added the thumbnails to this, so you can see a list of all of our thumbnails. So you'll notice the name of the page is in fact just the name of the file by default. So let's take a look at editing this description. So I just want to show you the internal header. You have edit metadata, you have edit behaviors, and quality control. These are the main things we'll be using, and the private item. So edit metadata, if you click on this, it will open up your metadata editing field, so you can edit any metadata that you have here. There'll be additional trainings in this in the future, of course. I just want to say there's basically two formats for this by default. And it says here you're using the simplified editing form. So in this form, come in here and maybe you want to add its name. You can see it's just a text box. We'll hit save. But if you wanted instead to have a full form and give you access to like all the subfields that you have in Mark and Mods, you click use the full editing form, click on it. And so now you're using the full editing form. So if we click on this name here, you'll see a form will pop up, and this gives you all the smaller pieces. So you could say, okay, so this was his given name, his family name is Thomas. Maybe you have additional information about this person, like 1912 to 1989 or something like this. So by using the full form, you'll get access to many of these different sub-elements, which should be familiar to you probably from work in a library with Mark or working with mods. We'll hit save. Once you make this change one time, basically the system analyzes the metadata coming in and will determine that indeed it should use the full form. So you'll see now it says you are using the full editing form because this item contains complex elements or was derived from Mark. So that's how to edit our metadata. We can also edit our behaviors. We talked about behaviors being sort of the way this item behaves within the system. So we could come in here and we could say that we want to add a different viewer perhaps. You could take away the page turner viewer if we liked. We could take away the related images viewer if we like. So you can do any sort of number of these things. Hit save. So you'll notice now the thumbnails view is actually gone. Page turner view remains, but you could turn this on and off. So the builder automatically adds some of these views based on the number of pages, controlled in your system-wide settings, but you can tell it to add the page turner automatically or not add the page turner automatically. And it will do it once there's 4 or more pages by default. So the only other thing I want to really show you, or the last major thing, is quality control. So we notice the name of our pages is sort of a strange name here. Let's go ahead and click quality control. This allows you to define the structural metadata about your item. So we'll come in here and we'll just say cover, and maybe cover 1. You'll notice it automatically numbers all your pages for you. We'll say this is page 1. And it numbers again all your pages for us. We're going to go ahead and delete this item, this one page from this item. We'll hit OK. That will delete it. And the last thing we can really do is we can define a table of contents. So that's what the D here is. So we can go ahead and say this is cover. This is our title page. This is a forward. And these are notes. So we can also select things like chapter here, and that will let us define the name for it. So here we can say that's our notes chapter. Keep going down. Here's another chapter called Quick Meringue. So we'll click this to make it a new division, and we'll type Quick Meringue. Let's find, I think there's another chapter in here for Slow Meringue, so we'll go ahead and pick that one. And there's a back cover. So we'll select the division again, and we'll select back cover. So this is a nice, easy way to control your items. If you needed to swap 2 pages, you can also do that here just by dragging and dropping them. So we can say, let's enable our drag and drop. And we'll just say these 2 pages need to be swapped. So we'll drag it here and boink, get it right between them. You'll see that it swapped around. So it's really easy just to drag your pages and reorder it. You can also use these buttons to do that. In a later training, we'll go into all the different things that are built into this. We'll go ahead and click complete. And you'll notice now there's a table of contents over here on this side. So we created this table of contents. We can click on it and say Quick Meringue. You'll also see our page numbering here that we defined our pages. We swapped some pages, so it looks a little funny there. So we basically created our metadata, worked through the behaviors, created the structural metadata. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to make this item public so the public can see it. This is where you can make things private. You can restrict items to different IP addresses. You can set embargo dates. We'll just go ahead and see public for now and hit save. And now your item is public, published to the people. Anyone who comes to your system, of course, as a search or browse will now find this resource. So that was a very quick overview of item submission. So thank you very much for joining us. I think next week we're going to talk about the basic architecture of the SobekCM system, give you an idea the different pieces that are interrelating with one another. So thank you again, and good luck submitting your resources.